Karen thought she was a hero when she sprayed pepper spray straight into a man's face over a Make America Great Again hat. She didn't know he was a U.S. Army general, or that her life was about to explode in ways she'd never imagined. How did it all go so wrong? Let's break it down. The parking lot in front of the supermarket was the usual mix of chaos and indifference. Shopping carts rattling, engines humming, kids whining for snacks. It was just another Saturday morning, but not for Karen. Nope. For her, every day was a battle for justice, or at least her version of it. As she tossed her reusable grocery bags into the trunk of her sedan, something caught her eye. A man was stepping out of a shiny black pickup truck. His truck screamed, "I make money," and his hat, emblazoned with the words MAGA, might as well have been a flashing neon sign that read, "Come at me." For Karen, it was a red flag the size of Texas. Her eyes narrowed. Not on my watch, she thought, slamming her trunk shut with enough force to make the car wobble. The man, tall, probably in his 60s, with the kind of posture that said, "I've seen some things," was busy minding his own business. That, of course, only made her angrier. Karen stormed toward him, her sneakers squeaking on the asphalt. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. Heads turned. The man paused, halfway to his truck bed, and looked over his shoulder. His expression was calm, almost bemused, as if she were a mildly interesting squirrel that had wandered too close. "Do you seriously think you can just walk around with that hat and not face consequences?" Karen snapped, jabbing a finger toward his head. Her tone was pure, righteous fury, the kind you'd expect from someone who thinks they're about to win an argument on live TV. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "Ma'am," he said, his voice even and polite, "I'm just here to load my groceries." Wrong answer. Karen's blood boiled. How dare he, she thought. The lack of an apology, the casual dismissal. It was too much. She fumbled in her purse, her fingers closing around a small canister. "Think again," she yelled, pulling out her trusty pepper spray like it was Excalibur. Without waiting for him to react, she pressed the nozzle and unleashed a stream of fiery justice right into his face. The man staggered back, coughing and shielding his eyes. The few onlookers who had been quietly observing the scene suddenly came alive. "Whoa, what are you doing?" one woman shouted, clutching her shopping bag like it might protect her. "That's assault," another guy yelled, pulling out his phone to start recording. But Karen, she stood her ground, holding the canister high like she just saved the planet. "This is what happens when you wear hate speech," she declared, her voice ringing out with the conviction of a superhero in her own mind. The man stumbled, blinking furiously and reaching for something inside his jacket. Karen's heart skipped a beat as something metallic glinted in the sunlight. A ripple of panic went through the small crowd. "He's got a weapon!" someone screamed. Karen's bravado wavered for a split second, but she quickly shook it off. This was just another example of why she had to act, right? Right? But as the man straightened up, wiping his face, the look he gave her wasn't anger. It was something far more unsettling. Calm, controlled, dangerous. Karen suddenly realized this situation might be a little more complicated than she'd planned. The screech of tires and flashing blue lights broke the tense hum of the parking lot. A police cruiser rolled up, drawing the attention of the growing crowd. Karen stood a few feet away, arms crossed, chin held high like she'd just saved a puppy from a burning building. To her, this was a victory lap. The man, still blinking furiously but with a little less chaos in his movements, was leaning against his truck. A couple of good Samaritans had handed him a bottle of water, which he was now using to rinse his eyes. He straightened up, pulled out his phone, and began speaking rapidly into it. The calmness in his voice sent a ripple of unease through Karen, though she quickly shrugged it off. What could he possibly say, she thought. I'm the one protecting people here. The officer who stepped out of the cruiser was a stocky man in his 40s, with a stern face that looked like it hadn't seen humor since the last millennium. He adjusted his belt, scanned the scene, and headed straight for Karen. "Ma'am," he began, his tone clipped. "Are you the one who used pepper spray?" Karen tilted her chin up, chest puffed out. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice firm. "He was walking around in that hat like it's okay. Someone had to take a stand." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice slow, like he was trying to process a particularly bad math problem. You sprayed someone because of their choice of clothing? Karen crossed her arms tighter, her patience thinning. It's not just clothing, she shot back. It's a symbol of hate. People like him think they can just flaunt it, and On that man, the officer cut her off, pointing toward the truck, is a decorated U.S. Army general. The words hit Karen like a freight train. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, as if her brain had short-circuited. Wait, what? She finally managed, her voice a whisper compared to her earlier shouts. The man, still wiping at his face, stepped forward. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. His posture, even while recovering from a face full of pepper spray, was commanding. He didn't just look like someone important, he felt like it. "My name," he said, his voice steady and cutting through the murmurs of the crowd, "is Jonathan Hughes. I've served this country for over 30 years, including 3 deployments overseas. And yet this woman decided, without knowing a thing about me, that I don't deserve to stand on this parking lot." His gaze locked onto Karen, and for the first time, she felt truly small. Karen stumbled over her words. But that hat, it represents freedom of speech," Hughes interrupted, his tone sharp enough to slice through steel. "And if anyone here needs a lesson in tolerance, it's you." The crowd, now fully invested in the drama, began whispering loudly enough for Karen to hear snatches of conversation. "She really messed up this time," someone muttered. "Unbelievable," another voice chimed in. "A general? She's toast." Karen's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth again, but nothing coherent came out. Instead, her eyes darted to the officer, silently pleading for some sort of intervention. The officer sighed, rubbing his temples like he'd been here 100 times before. "Ma'am," he said finally, his voice heavy, "I'm afraid we're going to have to take you in. You've just assaulted a senior military official in public." The murmurs turned into outright gasps. Karen, for the first time, felt the full weight of what had just happened. Her stand for justice had officially turned into a public spectacle, and not the good kind. As the officer gently but firmly guided her toward the cruiser, she could hear the crowd murmuring behind her. "Another classic Karen moment," one person said, shaking their head. "Yeah, but this one's going viral for sure," another added, holding up their phone. Karen's heart sank. Viral? Oh no. This wasn't just a bad day. This was the beginning of something much, much worse. Karen sat on the cold, unforgiving bench in the holding cell, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead did nothing to soften the reality of her situation. How did this even happen, she thought, her mind racing in circles. 1 minute she was fighting for what she believed was justice. The next, she was being escorted into a police car in front of a crowd filming her every move. The officer at the front desk walked over, leaning against the bars with a smirk that was just shy of condescending. "Karen, huh?" he said, shaking his head. "Didn't think I'd meet an actual internet meme in real life." Karen shot him a glare. "Very funny," she muttered, though she was too drained to put much venom into it. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the videos. She knew at least a dozen people had been filming her parking lot debacle, and by now, those clips were probably all over the internet. And she was right. Within hours, the video had exploded online. The title, "Karen Attacks a U.S. General in a Parking Lot," was trending across platforms. The comments section was on fire. She really thought she was the hero, huh? Only Karen could turn a peaceful grocery trip into a national event. Honestly, props to the general for keeping his cool. That lady was out of control. There were some voices of support, of course. A small fraction of commenters called her brave for standing up for what she believed in, but the overwhelming majority, they weren't on her side. "Karen," called the officer again, this time holding up a desk phone, "is for you, your lawyer." She hesitated before getting up, the weight of the situation pressing down harder with each step. Taking the receiver, she held it to her ear. "Hello? Karen?" came the clipped professional tone of her attorney. "We have a situation. General Hughes is pursuing legal action, and with that video going viral, you're facing an uphill battle." Karen's stomach sank. "But I didn't," she started, but the lawyer cut her off. "Save it. What you need to do now is prepare. We'll go over your statement before the hearing, but I'm going to be honest with you. This is bad. Meanwhile, General Hughes was being interviewed by the local news. Seated in a clean, minimalistic studio, he exuded calm authority. The anchor introduced him with glowing praise, recounting his decades of service and numerous commendations. General Hughes, the anchor began, the footage of today's incident has sparked a nationwide conversation. What are your thoughts? The general nodded thoughtfully before speaking. This isn't about me, he said, his whole voice steady but impassioned. This is about the broader issue of how quick we are to judge others based on appearances. Yes, I wear this hat. For me, it's a symbol of the freedoms I've spent my life defending. But today's events show how dangerous assumptions can be. We need to learn to listen to one another instead of jumping to conclusions. His words resonated deeply with the audience. Social media lit up with posts praising his composure and wisdom. A true leader, one comment read. We need more people like General Hughes. Karen's life, on the other hand, was spiraling. The day after her release, she walked into work only to be met with her manager's grim expression. Karen, he began awkwardly, we need to talk. Moments later, she was out of a job. The reason? Your actions have brought negative attention to the company. Friends who had once been regulars at her dinner parties stopped calling. Her face became a meme plastered across the internet with captions like, the Karen who took on the military and lost. By the time her court date rolled around, Karen was a shell of her former self. She stood in front of the judge, her voice trembling as she read an apology. Your Honor, I deeply regret my actions, she said. I acted impulsively and unfairly judged someone without knowing the full story. I've learned my lesson, and I hope to move forward as a better person. General Hughes, seated calmly across the courtroom, gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but the damage was done. Karen was ordered to pay a hefty fine and attend anger management classes. As she left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions at her, cameras flashing. She kept her head down, clutching her jacket tightly around her. In the weeks that followed, the incident became a cultural talking point. Debates raged about freedom of speech, the dangers of cancel culture, and the importance of understanding before acting. Karen's story was a cautionary tale, while General Hughes became a symbol of grace under fire. Karen, now out of the spotlight, reflected on her choices. She knew she couldn't erase what had happened, but perhaps in time she could rebuild. Her life had changed irrevocably, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a different kind of redemption.